Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us again. Welcome to the Seafood Matters podcast. If you want to help us, just press subscribe or share it with family and friends. That makes a real difference for our series. I'm delighted to welcome today Linda Wood, Community Catch CEO. Hi, Linda. Welcome to Seafood Matters.
Good morning, Jim. Really nice to be here.
Thank you. Nice to have you here. Really good. Linda, you've had an unusual journey from big retail into the heart of coastal communities. What pulled you into seafood?
Yeah, a really interesting journey, actually. One I'm really lucky to have had. So I guess I grew up in Lancashire, wanted to be a vet. That's what I was studying to be, and really was hoping that would be my career. Grew up on a farm, and then my dad, being Scottish, always had the call back to Scotland. So he was always looking to move back to Scotland. Moved back to Scotland when I was about 18 years old, to the northeast of Scotland, and I really couldn't not move back with him, I suppose. So moved back up to Peterhead, Hatton actually, near Peterhead, and started working at Torry Research Station then, which was a fantastic opportunity in Aberdeen. So was there for 4 years, learnt so much, worked with some amazing people, and very involved with the shellfish toxin monitoring actually at the time. So it was always quite science-based. Then Torry closed down. It was going to relocate to Yorkshire. So I thought, well, I've just moved north, so I'm not moving south again. So I thought I'll stay in Aberdeenshire, and started working in more hygiene-related areas, so microbiology, hygiene-related. So spent some time working in different abattoirs, butchery plants and different things around Aberdeenshire, doing hygiene inspections. And then my boyfriend at the time, now husband, lived in Peterhead, and he knew David John Foreman, who was a skipper who'd built a beautiful factory at the roundabout in Peterhead. So they'd been talking about me, I think, and I got the opportunity to join as a quality control person, basically, at Foreman Fish in Peterhead, working with 60 hand filleters back in 1996. So I didn't know anything about fish really, apart from I liked eating it and realised it was pretty significant in Peterhead area. But so started there in 1996, and then spent 20 odd years really in manufacturing after that. So I've moved from Peterhead through to McRae Fraserburgh, which was a really big site. Was there for 10 years, amazing, learnt so much during that time, worked with some real veterans in the industry who were well ahead of their time. So I feel like I got a fantastic schooling there. Definitely got a schooling, because you were told if you were not doing the right thing, definitely. And then, in 2008, got the opportunity to move down to London area to work with another manufacturer, because I was always very interested in the supply base and the fisheries and the farms, and then processing them and then selling them into retail. Got the opportunity to move closer to London in 2008 to work for New England Seafood. So moved down there, got to travel a little bit, get out to Alaska a few times, Maldives, Indonesia, Turkey, Greece, and it was just really interesting. Again, similar model where spending a lot of time in the supply chain and then manufacturing product into UK retail mainly. And then I left there 2018 and set up on my own, really, just started consulting, which was cool. Learned some new things, did a little bit of non-fish work just to learn something else. And then I got the opportunity to join Marks & Spencer's as a consultant initially to cover a maternity cover as a responsible sourcing area. So I covered a maternity leave, and then the lady I was covering from came back from maternity leave and then left. So I was offered the opportunity to join as a permanent person. Probably wasn't ever the intention to join retail full time. I was always liked my primary suppliers and the supply base side, but got the opportunity to, and I was there for about 5 years in total. So just finished up there in April this year.
Some journey.
Yeah, very much primary side, primary processing. I have a huge respect for that and the supply chain. That's my real passion and interest, really, being quite close to it all. And then I've been involved in Community Catch for about 4-ish years. So it started being talked about 4 years ago or so, and I was on the advisory board then, giving an opinion about markets and manufacturing, I suppose. Got the opportunity to chair the board of trustees in 2024. And then in April this year, when I left Marks and Spencer's, I was able to join leading up the operation, which is a fantastic honour and role I'm still growing into, I suppose. Still learning the ropes, really. First time in that sort of position, working for a charity as well.
Do you mind if I ask you, when you mentioned McRae's, did you ever meet a guy, Roy Cunningham?
Yes, yeah, he was on one of the sister sites. So we had Strathard and we had Edinburgh as well. So yeah, we were a phenomenal group, the McRae group, just really premium quality products, great ethics, great morals in the business. Roy Cunningham was one of the big stalwarts of the business, real characters, and just great. These guys are still really important in the industry and, shaped a lot of, how it is today. So yeah, still see these guys around from time to time.
My wife is from a small village up in the Highlands here, Brora.
Okay.
And that's where Roy's from.
Okay, yeah.
Roy's mother and father were real close friends of ours.
Okay, yeah.
And unfortunately, Roy lost his dad earlier this year. I met him we're down at the funeral and we met him. But Roy's grandmother, what an amazing character she was.
Really?
She lived 104.
Really? Wow. I think looking at people's grandparents and parents tells you a lot about the person, doesn't it? And why the person's how they are, how you brought up.
Roy's grandmother, Hetty, and my wife's mother, my mother-in-law, Kathy. So picture the scene. They went out walking every day, come hail, sunshine, rain, they were out walking. And it came round to the time of year when in the conversation, Mary's mum says to Hetty, did you get the letter for the old folks treat this year? And Hetty, as I said, that's Roy's grandmother, she says, yes, Kathy, I got it. But she says, I don't fancy going. She says, I don't like sitting there with all that old ones.
Yeah.
That was her comment. Old ones.
Yeah.
Do you know how old she was when she said that, Linda?
Probably in the 90s or something.
93.
Really? Yeah. Didn't connect with it at all. Yeah.
And I still think of that because there would be 65 to 75-year-olds there. But, and I thought, what a wonderful way to...
Yeah. Just doesn't see herself as being old at all. Exactly. Yeah, it's a state of mind, isn't it?
Yeah.
Important.
Yeah. No, it's just fantastic.
State of mind, definitely. It is.
If I could go on there and ask, do you feel there must have been a learning experience and if I was to say with like a M&S, now I'll tell you where I'm coming from there, Linda.
Yeah.
In my time when I had a seafood restaurant up here, spoke to a lot of chefs, and I've been a member of the Scottish Chefs and the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, and you would be talking to chefs. You would think somebody, a chef who's involved in, say, fine dining, he's in a Michelin restaurant.
Yeah.
You would think, he'll tell you that how they come through working in, obviously, chef and kitchens in a big hotel chain or a big restaurant chain. And you would think, where's the match there? How could somebody going through all that chains that are not really at the Michelin standard, what's there to learn? But they always felt the disciplines for things like portion control. It was such a great, to have that behind them. So do you feel with that kind of organizations, you can learn?
Yeah, I think that's what's exciting about it. And I think you should always be trying to learn something new. So moving into retail and Marks and Spencer's was a real change for me. You have a perception of what a retailer's like when you're in a manufacturing site supplying a retailer, because you interact with them a lot. But when you're actually there and you understand the diversity of the range of things you've got to consider all the time, the size of the organization, the fact you're representing a brand is a very different approach as well to an own label site. It's a real change. And, I think that what had stood me in good stead, I suppose, was, having that education and that schooling through the likes of McRae Fraserburgh, where I was working with people who were absolute veterans in their industries, and Brian Patterson, Sylvia Maitland, were two people running that factory, and they were strict. When you're 20 odd years old, you think you know everything at that point, don't you? And you absolutely don't know anything. And having the opportunity to work with these guys who have done it all, and they teach you some really hard lessons sometimes, but you need to learn them. You need to be told, and I think it sets you up for that. So I felt quite grounded in that I knew what I was doing, I suppose, from a manufacturing point of view and processing. But when you go into a retailer like Marks and Spencer's, that's not necessarily their background. So I tried to bring that knowledge and those relationships from the primary supply chain into the retailer, so that they had a better appreciation of how hard it is actually for a fisherman, a farmer, a primary processor, secondary processor to actually get the fish on the shelf every day looking exactly the same, and how actually that's not the natural style of the fish anyway. It's got one head, one tail, but just getting people grounded in the realities of fishing, the realities of weather, how weather can have a massive impact on availability. And so, I worked really hard during that time. And I would like to think that during my time there, that the M&S team, had a lot of interactions then with the fishermen, farmers, and also the primary suppliers, and really understand now the importance of those close relationships and being honest and open with each other, and looking to build those long-term futures together. Luckily M&S are not a business that trade with suppliers. They have many long-term partnerships, and really long-term, 20 odd 30 years, which is fantastic. And they're with each other through thick and thin. But to get through that thick and thin, you've got to really understand each other's businesses. And I think that they took the time to do that. And, there's some primary suppliers in particular and fisheries where I think they've got, nice, solid relationships there now, and which is good for all parties. Marks and Spencer's needs reliable supply chains, and the supply chains need a reliable customer who's not going to walk away from them when the going gets tough. So I think it works for both parties when there's that understanding.
I would agree with that, Linda. And I could tell you, when my days in the fishing industry, I worked closely with some boats, and we had a contract with, I'm sure maybe you would know, Mac Fisheries in Fraserburgh.
Yeah, that's where I was working, yeah.
Oh, right. Well, we had a contract with Macfish, and there were 3 boats landing direct to them. Yeah. And it was M&S.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I would add, in fairness to them all, that you didn't the word that you didn't mention, which I thought was there, trust. And, there was a trust as well, which was good. And what you're saying there is how they worked with people. That contract lasted over 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, it potentially could still be in place. The Scottish haddock, as an example, is an absolute beacon of M&S fish range. M&S are unique in the fact that they support Scottish haddock above Icelandic, Norwegian haddock. It's a dominant haddock that's sold in M&S. They're the only retailer that do that. That takes a huge amount of work. Really long-term partnerships, which David John Foreman's factory, Foreman Fish, used to be part of. That's now Luna. It's now coated. It used to all be coated in McFisheries when they were doing that. It's moved now. But that northeast of Scotland is really, really important to Marks and Spencer's, as is the Nefrot fishery up there as well. So long-standing roots, lots of trust. But I think as well as trust, there's got to be a lot of respect, I think, for both parties. So I think any market has to respect that the fishermen and the processors have choice, and they don't have to sell you anything they don't want to. And I think people think that all the power sits with the retailer, but I'm not sure it does, actually. I think that the person who's got the fish has the weight of power. They can decide where they want to sell that. So I think there's got to be a lot of respect in that relationship for both parties to want to work with each other for that long a period of time and still keep the product, of the best possible quality, but also at a price where consumers can still afford it. And, the volumes are working for everybody. So it's a delicate balance.
When you mention the Scottish haddock, I remember at that contract, what M&S were doing is they were, it was what the smaller size, a haddock,
Yeah.
and they would put 2 fillets together,
Yeah.
and in the pack. Now, what I find really, really sad now, Linda, I don't know we don't have an M&S up here, so I don't know if M&S are still doing that.
Yeah.
But the market seems to be all going to bigger fish. Now, on the market, bigger size of haddocks will be making 150 to 180 pound for a 40 to 45 kilo box. The smaller size that we were working then with Macfish and M&S, they can't sell that now.
Well, in M&S, it's still exactly the same, Jim. It's exactly the same. It's paired haddock. So it's 2 small haddock, one on top of each other. And actually, that's extended even more now. They now put them together like a shingle to make the big, make them wider and longer as well. So it's like some sort of Jenga game, really, now putting them together. But it's all based on the small Scottish haddock. And you can't make a small Scottish haddock at suddenly this giant fish. But what you can do is double it in thickness by putting one on top of each other. So the entire Scottish haddock range in M&S is based on those small haddocks. We don't expect to be able to get a fillet anything above 110 probably as a single fillet, because then that's the fish and chip guys, and they take that bigger fish. So yeah, but I would say the majority probably is about 80% at least of all the haddock sold in M&S is Scottish haddock. So it's not the big fish that you cut into portions. So I think that's something that M&S and Peterhead should be really proud of, and it's a unique selling point. And yeah, and you want to be loud and proud about that and get the flags all over it, really, because and it tastes different. Scottish haddock tastes really different to an Icelandic, Norwegian haddock. It's got much sweeter taste of where it came from. It's great, really delicious.
That's really interesting, because here, I'll tell you a story. Just a few months ago now, a fisherman friend of mine was landing in Scrabster.
Yep.
He says to me, as fishermen do, go and help yourself to some fish, Jim. I went over and 6 haddock in the bag.
Yep.
And he says, don't take that rubbish. This is him, but his own fish. Mm-hmm. He said, don't take that rubbish. He says, there's better fish in the market. I says, look, this is absolutely fine for me. I'm looking forward to this. I got home, filleted it, and I was looking at the fillet. And I thought, because I had some retail, I had a retail outlet back in the days, and I was had also some fresh fish counters in one of our local supermarkets chains.
Okay.
So I had an experience with retail, and I'm looking at this fillet and I'm thinking, my goodness, that's the fish that we would be having on our the slab in the counter. And I took the wee kitchen scales out, weighed them, and in old money, 4-ounce fillet was the popular size. Because a mother could come in and buy 4 fillets for the pound, and that would feed her family. And so I put this fish on the scale, and they were from 4.5 to 5.5 ounce. So a great size for what I classed as retail in my day. So, Linda, do you know where that fish came from? When the skipper told me, don't take that, do you know where I picked them out of? The lobster crab bait.
Really? Wow.
Because I can't sell them on the market.
I mean, I can only comment on the M&S supply chain, really, and I know the volume that we used to take through there, and I know that we pretty much were buying off most vessels in the fleet. So definitely buying significant volumes. But, it's a big quota, that fishery. And it's, it's a big quota. People can't catch the whole quota really, so there's a lot of fish available. M&S is one customer. I think there have been recent discussions about others setting up a business to utilise the haddocks into another form, I believe, in Peterhead. I'm not that close to that model particularly, but yeah, it's a phenomenal product. I guess it's my normal. That's how I started in 1996, working with the ladies on the Torrey freezer, freezing these paired haddocks to a specific length so they'd fit in the box. So it's kind of always been my normal to expect haddock to be that size. So, I don't think anybody should be apologetic about the size of the haddock. They taste delicious. They're fantastic product, and you can use them for multiple reasons. So I think that, I think it's really for the markets to create those opportunities to sell more of them. It's great product. It's kind of irrelevant what size it is, really. And if you're clever, you can make them physically, be bigger in size, if you want to, by freezing them in different ways, which is what M&S have sort of done. So instead of M&S saying, I want a big haddock, let me just buy an Icelandic one, they actually they made it work and created that from a Scottish haddock. And
and I was involved with that. So I knew that, Linda.
Yeah, you've got to put the effort in. But I think that's with all things in life, isn't it? You have to kind of get behind something and stick with it and put the effort in to make it better, and not just throw your hands in the air and walk away and say it's too hard. So I think that's why things stick, isn't it? So there's a huge amount of effort goes into that supply chain just now to keep innovating and keep that product shelf.
I'm pleased to hear you say that about M&S, and I think they should fly the flag proudly, because as you know, there's many of the big supermarket chains, their plea is that they're supporting British fishermen and British farmers, but you'll have Irish beef in the shelves and Norwegian and Icelandic cod and haddock. And I'd never ever got my head around how that's supporting British fishermen and farmers.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point to make. And luckily M&S absolutely back British farmers for all their animals, pork, beef, lamb, and you'll proudly see that on the labels in store. I think it's fundamentally important personally that you back yourself first. The Scottish haddock model is a great example of that. And I think customers should be demanding to know where their product's coming from. You should expect to see that on the label, transparency to see where it's coming from. Then you can make a choice. My brother's a sheep farmer, and he's jumping up and down all the time about New Zealand lamb. And I keep pointing him to M&S shelves and saying, I think you'll notice that it's all here. It's Scottish or it's Welsh. It's here. And he said, but that's not the majority, Linda. That's not what everybody's doing. But I think the customer needs to start asking for that wherever they shop, needs to start asking for where does this come from and making a choice based on where it comes from, because it is available. But I think the customer has to start caring a little bit more about what they're eating and where it comes from, because that will help create the demand for it. But yeah, certainly feel proud that M&S are very much about backing British farmers. And it's not just words, it's real, it's on shelf. You'll see that yourself. I got looking across any of the protein areas and other retailers as well in many areas. But I think one of the reasons for, in seafood in particular, and this probably brings us on maybe to Green to Catch a little bit, but unfortunately, a lot of the markets now have started to come under quite a lot of pressure to defend their responsible sourcing claims. So can they really say that their fish is responsibly sourced? And a lot of retailers have actually said, well, unless the fish is MSC, so Marine Stewardship Council certified, then that's my sourcing policy. So I'm going to really prefer and select mainly MSC fish that I'm going to sell in my store. But unfortunately, there's not that many MSC fisheries in the UK right now. The MSC is a fantastic scheme. Scottish haddock is MSC, Cornish hake is MSC, sardines are MSC. But usually these are pretty big, valuable commercial fisheries. And it's really it's a great initiative. It just covers environment, ecosystem, doesn't cover social, animal welfare. And it's really expensive. So the majority of species that are being caught around the coast of the UK are not an MSC fishery. And many of them will never be able to achieve that either. So what's happening is some of the retailers are starting to, move away a little bit from local sourcing and backing a MSC only agenda. And that means that they're starting to walk away from species they would have sourced on their own shores, and they'll rather import it from, elsewhere. And we know the statistics. I think I always get it mixed up, but is it we export 70% of what we catch and import 80% of what we eat, which is just ridiculous. So, there's a big gap there. And the markets, having that sort of MSC only agenda is not helpful, really. So that is not helping things. But I think there's an alternative now. And again, I can only speak of M&S. Their policy was not to do that. It was to source British first, and elsewhere if you couldn't get the product British. And that meant that you can work with fisheries which are smaller scale. Maybe they can't access MSC. They're smaller scale, doing a fantastic job, just don't have that particular badge. And that's where Community Catch really comes in to help markets be able to responsibly source from these fisheries that don't have this big certification attached to them. That's sort of how it's come full circle, really.
Now that you're on the community side, what do you wish retailers understood better about coastal realities?
I think you've got to go and see it to appreciate it. I think when you're stood in a harbour and literally there's 2 boats left from the fleet, and there used to be a healthy fleet there, and you see the people who are still trying to make a livelihood of it, and now it's all yachts and instead of or oil vessels instead of fleets. It's really quite impactful, and that it's directly connected with, well, where are you buying your fish from? So you've got to create the market for people. So I think that I always like the term boots on the ground. You've got to get out of the office and you've got to go and see where your fish is coming from, and you've got to try and find creative ways of bringing that British seafood to UK consumers and trying harder. But in honesty, it is really hard for a retailer to bring a British seafood to shelf, because you have to do more of the work yourself. So you can't just say, oh, well, it's MSC, I don't need to worry about that. You need to actually go there and understand it and risk assess it yourself. So it requires more effort. You can't just sit in an office and look for a tick box. You have to actually, get involved and build those long strategic relationships. And people are time poor. Not everybody. Some people just want it to be quite straightforward and aren't prepared maybe to make the effort that's required to do that. Again, I'm really lucky that I was never involved in that, really. I've always been lucky enough to work with markets who want to go the extra mile and want to make it work, because the raw material is so fantastic and the product quality is world class, and you want to get that in front of the customers. So so I think the people have got to know and expect to know, where is your product coming from? And that's not just seafood. Where did it come from? Who was involved?
When you were saying when you found it really hard, I was just having a recent recording with, I'm sure you know him very well, Mike Warner.
Yes. Yeah, very well.
Mike was just making the point that he finds it really hard, the fact that as a nation, an island nation, getting the people to eat fish. Yeah, it is strange, isn't it? It's peculiar. We've got too much choice, I think, people in the UK. I think we're too spoiled, probably, in many ways. We've got too much other things we can be doing. But I think, consumption is pretty high in some areas, and I think that we have to be understanding, how is a customer eating fish nowadays? So, when you go shopping in the supermarket, I don't think people necessarily go in and say, I want fish tonight. They might just say, I fancy some pasta tonight. They might not know what flavour pasta, but they just think they want some pasta. Or I want to have something with, potatoes and vegetables, but they don't know what the protein's going to be. And I think
I think fish has got as good a chance as anything else. I do think, it is more expensive pound for pound as a protein. So I think people take less risks with it. I think if you're buying a packet of chicken and if you do or don't eat them, it's less impactful. So I think people want to, take less risks buying fish. They want to know it's fantastic quality. I think fish as well tells you if it's not fantastic quality as soon as you open the pack. So you've got to be buying, good stuff to not get that smell and taste for people. But I think, fish is amazing. It's, there's, 42 different types of chicken, basically, aren't there? In the average retailer selling about 40 odd species, and each one of them tastes really different. And whereas there's one chicken, and maybe it's free range or something, but it's still one animal. So it's complicated, but I think there's a fish species for the meat eater, for the guys who like the red meat. I think tuna, nice and meaty, halibut, etc. And then you've got the fish and chips, the coated, which any white fish really is fabulous as soon as you put coating on it, but Scottish haddock in particular. And then the shellfish is incredible. So, people eat a huge amount of warm water prawns. They're all imported. Although I did read recently that we've got some now being farmed in Scotland, which is exciting. In warm tanks, by the way, not outside. But yeah, so prawns. But if you look at our langoustines, the langoustine is the ultimate prawn, the absolute gold bar ultimate prawn. And, not just devaluing it by putting it all into scampi all the time. Not that scampi is devalued, but it's treated like a snacky chicken nugget type product. And it's actually so much more than that. Langoustine is a absolute desert island food. It's last meal type stuff. It's just spectacular. And we cover it in breadcrumbs and devalue it and hide it really. And, to elevate that back up to, if you look at lobster, you'd never put lobster in, a scampi, would you? So, and langoustine to me is very similar. So I think in a restaurant in London, you'll be paying £5 per langoustine, whole langoustine. And I think there's opportunity there in langoustine to remind people that we've got our own cold water prawn in the UK, and it's amazing. And you can eat it on its own without breadcrumb on and stuff, and create new markets. I think restaurants help with that a lot. Serving langoustine, even in a prawn cocktail is a spectacular thing. So so I think there's lots of opportunity for it. I realise it can be more expensive, but then I think we've got different species at different price points as well to help with that. So yeah,
I'm enjoying this chat, Linda. And never did I think when I was saying there about how do we get more local fish consumed, I never thought we would get our Scottish haddock promoted by a Lancashire lass.
Yeah, my dad's Scottish, so I definitely always.
So you're half Scottish.
Half Scottish, yeah, and never forget that. Yeah, and husband's from Peterhead, so
okay, Peterhead.
Yeah, Peterhead. So half my life really is So yeah, it's very important to me, and yeah, I mean, I grew up in Lancashire. My closest, I guess, Fleetwood would have been the closest. That would have been a fishing fleet back in the day when I was there. So that was probably my closest. But I suppose I grew up eating cockles and winkles, where they'd serve, in little pots of cockles and winkles, and smoked haddock was quite common as well. So, my family still eat a lot of fish all the time. So, my dad was a massive fisherman. So, recreational fisherman. So it was always part of our diets. But I think you've got to care. I think you've got to back what's on your doorstep and do as much as you possibly can to promote that. So but it takes effort. It does take effort.
Absolutely, and commitment. Because I'm just thinking to myself here, your husband's from Peterhead.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you weren't long there before you understood why they call it the blue tune.
I know, and why everybody is approximately 4'8" tall, because it's so cold, and it's not helpful being tall, is it? No, it's that biting East Coast wind was it's quite a lot, isn't it? But I came from the West Coast, which was wet and damp, so I'm not sure what's better. Maybe somewhere in the middle, but yeah, it was. it was an education moving to the northeast of Scotland and the Doric accent. And, I wouldn't say me and my family were made totally welcome initially. We were outsiders for a good while. And Hatton was a very, small community. But, I think it builds character, doesn't it? You have to make it work, and you have to get on with people, and you have to make those connections. And, growing up on a farm, I suppose, I was always lucky enough my dad was always dragging us somewhere to speak to some farmer somewhere about something. So you learn very quickly that you had to be able to have a conversation and find common ground. And I think it stood me in good stead. So getting involved and everything. So yeah, I think it's maybe helped. I've no doubt they find me quite annoying, and I ask lots of questions. That I think I'm famous for that, but it's all part of me trying to understand and then ultimately help and support.
I think the important part, what comes over across to me, Linda, is you sound very happy, and that's very good. That's excellent.
Yeah, it's a passion. It's never been just a job for me, seafood.
No.
It's a big part of my life and who I am, and bore people to death.
Or as a friend of mine often used to say, the fishing industry, it's not an industry, it's a disease.
Disease. That's a bit bleak. I don't know. It's just it's a way of life, isn't it? I guess I can't claim to be a fisherman or a fish farmer or anything like that, and that's not for me really. Leave that to the experts. But the bits I can do, hopefully, support those industries, and just an enthusiast.
Yeah, but you come across there, you're an expert in your field, so. And there's none of them experts in every field.
No, we all, and that's the benefit of us all coming together. And there's certain forums now in the UK where you can come together and get really close, with fishers but also the scientists, government bodies as well, and try and work it out and find a way forward to challenges that seem to be endless and coming at you from all different directions. So, again, that takes a lot of respect though, and time, and listening to each other's concerns and trying to understand each other and where we're all coming from.
Yeah. See, now you're on the community side.
Yeah.
What's the practical on the ground change for you're most focused on delivering right now?
Yeah. So community catch is, it took a while to choose a name, and it's very specifically called community catch. So this is about the people and the community and the impact on the community from that catch. And so it's wild sector only. We're a charity. So we're a charity that specifically is focused on small scale fisheries. So small scale fisheries doesn't specifically just mean you're a tiny boat. It means it's a combination of things. It means vessels owned by somebody locally. How long are you away at sea for? Where are you fishing? What type of gear are you using? What size your boat is? And it's a combination of factors. But really, the reason we exist, and we're fulfilling a gap. So the majority of fisheries around the UK and the world, so community catch is a global standard, are small scale, and that's where the majority of people work. So, and they're really not being catered for or recognised globally by the markets. They're kind of invisible in many ways. So that's from the sort of fishery point of view. They can't access those markets because they can't prove their credentials to anybody. And then from a market point of view, they can't see them because they're not visible, or they're not in a fishery improvement plan, or they're not going towards MSC. But the risks in all of that for the market are that the worst thing that can happen for a market is to have some front page news headlines saying such and such retailer sources fish from a boat with human rights abuses or animal welfare abuses, or overfishing of fish stock. It's not good press for anyone to go through that. So community catch really is trying to sort of make it easier for everybody really to demonstrate that they've got good due diligence across those areas. So you can't separate a fish stock and an ecosystem impact from the human beings that are on that boat trying to catch that fish. So, you've got to care about the health and safety of those crew. You've got to care about the labour rights of them, that they're being looked after properly. The UK fleet doesn't just have Scottish people in anymore. For the Scottish fleet, for instance, we've got people from all over the world in the fleet now, and we've got to make sure we're looking after them. There's no exploitation going on. And then, something that's quite close to my heart and might be controversial is, animal welfare. We have to start acknowledging that, fish are sentient, shellfish is sentient. It's the same as a cow or a lamb in the field. And, and it hasn't had the same attention. But to a consumer, it is as important. And the consumer would not want to know that something bad's happened to a haddock as he would a lamb or a pig. And they may not be able to see it because it's at sea and it's underwater, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to improve that situation. So we want to look at that too. And so we've created this standard, really, which looks at all of those things. So ecosystem, environment, human rights, health and safety, animal welfare and climate. And it's a first of its kind. So there's no other scheme at all available for wild fish of any scale, whether it's small scale or large scale, which looks at all of those metrics. And so for a market to be able to say, I am responsibly sourcing, shouldn't just be about saying my fish stock is okay and my environment's okay. Surely to say I'm responsibly sourcing should include the welfare of the crew on the boat and the impact you're having on the community and the animals that you're catching and handling. So we think we've got a really strong, holistic, responsible sourcing scheme that people can get involved in. And this is about not top down and telling people what to do. This is about helping empower those fisheries to get the recognition they deserve. So there are many fisheries, again, around the UK coast where they can't access MSC. It's too expensive or too complicated for them. But they want to be moving forward, and people won't buy from them because they'll say, well, are you in a fishery improvement plan? No. Are you MSC? No. Okay, well, I'm sorry, I can't buy from you. So they're just stuck, really. So they want to take some action to get that recognition. So if they get involved in the community catch scheme and start providing their information on the social elements and environmental ecosystem, then by going through that process, they then have an identity. So then they have something to talk to a market about. They can say, these are my credentials. This is full transparency of my fishery. Can we have a conversation? And that makes it easier for the markets as well. So, we definitely fill a gap that's evident globally. And so we're making good strides already, and we've got several UK fisheries already involved with us for that very reason, to get on the front foot, really, and to come out of this state of where they're watching markets walk away and to actually get back into the game again and start talking to markets and really getting to sell their product.
Listening to you, Linda, I find it fascinating. I genuinely mean that, because it's just taking me through so many different parts of my life. I class myself as from a small coastal community. I've born and brought up in a small fishing village, Helmsdale. And here's one that'll relate to you, or you'll relate to it, sorry. My mother used to, when I was a kid, I remember her telling me that the local butcher, sister, he can tell on the takings if the boats had a good week.
And because of how much product he's selling?
Yeah, he would sell more and maybe better cuts of beef and meat and things like that. He could tell in his till if the boats were having a good week. That's communities. Everybody's benefiting.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just understanding what you're saying. Yeah, money in people's pockets. Yeah, so they're making a good income. They've got money to spend. They can spend it in the local community. The ship chandlers, thriving. The boat repair, the shipyard. All these different things. That whole community works off. I can't remember the exact statistics, but for every boat, the amount of people that on shore are supported as a result of that. It's a whole network, and people are probably about one or two steps away from being directly connected to a boat and fishermen somewhere. And it's hugely impactful. And you can see towns become ghost towns, can't you? And it's really sad to see. And you see it up and down the coast of the whole UK, and people hanging on by the fingernails a little bit in some fisheries to be the last man standing. And it's very sad, because it's a very difficult thing to reintroduce again.
Yeah,
and that all that information, all that knowledge that's not passed on. Then
we used to reckon, it was said back in my time in the job, there were, for every man at sea, there were 6 or 7 jobs ashore.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, it is, and that's a lot of employment, isn't it? And we certainly need that nowadays, don't we?
The other point I was just thinking about, we're saying about the people can't buy MSC. You made a point about somebody, oh, we can't buy from you because you're not MSC approved. I had a almost slightly similar situation because we got chain of custody with a restaurant, the seafood restaurant I had up in the north here when we had it. And I had a situation with them on mackerel. Now, for me to be able to use their logo, and I had to buy the mackerel from one of the big Peterhead processors. And I said, look, the mackerel I've got on my menu, I says, if I go out the kitchen door and look out the bay, I says, I can see the guys that are fishing for mackerel. And I says, so am I going to refuse that and buy it frozen and get it transported from Peterhead? So I thought that was just, and I didn't take it from them.
Yeah.
So,
and that's a perfect example, and that's even shipping within the same country, but that's what's happening with people. So, this obsession with only one label will tell you that this is responsibly caught fish is not okay, really. You wouldn't, and what's quite surprising about it is in aquaculture, so markets buying from aquaculture have always had choice. They've always had options of which scheme fisheries farms could be part of. So, ASC, BAP and Global Gap have always been open to all retailers to purchase from them. But in the wild sector, there's really only been MSC. So what's happened is that, markets, maybe lazier markets, have just said, well, if it's not MSC, it's no good. And that is not the case. And so small scale fisheries are being left behind and the gap's getting wider. So we are determined to make that more equitable with community catch by engaging these small scale fisheries, empowering them, telling them that they can be successful, and engaging them in community catch, and at the same time as the market's recognising community catch as being a viable, credible scheme, which stands up, shoulder to shoulder with MSC, but also offers a lot more. It offers lots of reassurance around the social aspects, health and safety. You'll get an indicator of whether your crew are being treated well or not, animal welfare, climate impact. We also use, fisher voice tools. So we actually interview the crew on the boats and get them to tell us what their experience is like as well. We're not just saying it's all perfect. We're actually speaking directly to people. And we're really excited about that. And it just levels the playing field. So then, these small fisheries that can't afford MSC can still represent themselves and talk to markets. And yeah, we're really excited about that. And we're having lots of conversations with markets to acknowledge the scheme. So Marks and Spencer's were one of the first markets to acknowledge that. We've got Migros in Switzerland, we've got Woolworths South Africa, and there's quite a number of UK retailers as well we expect to follow in the new year. Once we've got some fisheries that have gone through the process and popped out the other end. So we're in the middle of the GSSI benchmarking process. That basically is the credibility piece, where we have to benchmark ourselves and our standard against a standard with GSSI, which is what's used as a yardstick, I suppose, by retail. We're going through that process as well. So I'm confident that within the next year, we should have all the major UK retailers acknowledging community catch as being a viable, credible way to source seafood. And when that happens, that means that actually any UK fisheries that have gone through the community catch route could then have access to UK retail that they don't have right now if they're not in FIP. And that's really exciting. That's impact. So very excited about that progressing.
I find that very exciting. And I feel, as I said just now, about coming from a small community, like coastal community, I feel it's encouraging for the people in that position now that community catch are on their side, and it can be a big help for them.
Yeah, it's been built with them. So, we carried out lots of alpha trials, beta trials over 23, 24. Orkney crab was one of those fisheries that we did a lot of work with. Orkney crab is a great example of a fishery that they tried to get MSC back in time, and they tried very hard, but they cannot access it because how it works out, the stocks and everything, it's expecting them to have influence over a wider fishing area than they're actually fishing in Orkney. They're quite an inshore fishery there, and they'll never hit that metric. So they can't move forward with MSC even if they wanted to. So they're left in this limbo situation with this FIP that they're running just now for brown crab that's not going anywhere, can never go towards MSC. And they've got markets hanging on by the fingernails saying, well, it's a bit awkward, really. We really need you to move forward. And so what are they to do? So, we've always worked really closely with them. Community Catch will be a phenomenal initiative for them to come through. They're halfway through it at the moment, and to be able to say, I'm Orkney Crab and these are my credentials for my crew, my community, this is the impact I'm having on the community. And not only, quite excitingly, not only will they be certifying brown crab, but also the lobster that they catch as well, and the velvet crabs. So then people will be able to talk about Orkney lobster and wow, which again is if you can get your hands on one, fantastic. But Orkney crab and lobster being able to be sold into any markets wherever in the world, but hopefully on our doorstep first. So very excited about that. And Orkney crab's one of our real leading fisheries around the world that will benefit from this. And they're a great example of that. But I think inshore shellfish generally as an area need something like Community Catch to really help them out. And we need those inshore fisheries to, believe in Community Catch and come with us on the journey to recognition. And we're having great conversations all the way around the UK coast about various species, shellfish being one of them, but also, fish as well in different areas, fish in small fisheries, 50 boat type things, inshore day boats, and, these are non-tax species, and who's looking at them? Who's trying to help them? So, yeah, very excited about what we can deliver in the UK. But I have to say it's a global standard. So whatever we're doing in the UK, that's on my doorstep. So and something I feel very passionate about. But we need to replicate that in South America, East Africa, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, wherever the need is, because, generally the need is in the Southern Hemisphere. But interesting to know that, it's as challenging here as well. We haven't got it easy in the North either.
No. When you mention Orkney, do you go to Orkney yourself?
Yes, to the point where I think I went 3 times in 1 year, and my line manager commented that maybe I needed to not go for a while because I was 3 times in the same year. But yeah, Orkney's phenomenal, very special. It was probably one of the first trips I ever took when I was at McFisheries, and I went up to see some salmon farming back in the day with Willie Baxter, who was a pioneer of his time with his Tasmanian strain. And we took the tiny little plane and landed on Papawestry. And so I've got Orkney's fantastic now, and I miss not going to the other islands so much as I have done in the past. But I'll be back up there again early next year, with the Orkney crab and then Orkney crab fishermen. I can't wait. It's a really, really special place. But I want to get out to the islands this time, and just see. It's so diverse. Each island's really different, and the geography of it all is spectacular. So yeah, it's very special.
Do you go to Westray?
Yeah, I went to Westray and Papawestry on my first trip. I haven't been back since. The closest I would have been, I guess, near a salmon farm, which would have been near there. But I have not been to Westray for, probably since 1990, maybe year 2000, actually. 25 years probably since I've been there.
We try to go up as often as my wife and I, we try to go up there as often as we can. We just love it. Absolutely love it. And when we had the restaurant in Scrabster, and obviously people would be coming in for a meal maybe when they were waiting for the ferry or something like that. And obviously they were going to Orkney, and they would maybe, and I used to say to them, maybe set them up a bit. I would say to them, do you know the best part of, you want to know the best part of Orkney? Oh, yeah. What's the best part of Orkney? Where do we go? And I would say, the best part of Orkney is the people.
Yeah, it's spectacular. The accent's lovely. It's like people are singing to you. It's so beautiful as an accent.
Lovely people.
Yeah, but just the geography of it all, and Scapa Flow, and like just the currents and between the islands, and it's just mad, isn't it? It's raw nature, and really. Luckily, it was one of the first places I went to, and I was, there in the first instance looking at salmon farming, which is not wild fisheries, but still just how nature is deciding basically what's happening, the fate of everything, isn't it? The fate of everyone's success at sea is nature, and we can't really argue with that, can we?
No, indeed. Where's the biggest opportunity to genuinely move the needle for coastal communities?
I think it is about, like getting that market recognition. So we've already got fisheries, Southern Hemisphere now, who've got tremendous line fisheries, one man, one boat, one line, tiny volumes of fish, and they're trying to find markets. And they're doing this amazing thing, but they're just invisible. And so, the joy of being able to connect them with someone who wants to buy their product, who can't access it right now, is so powerful. And it's transformative really for those communities. So, basically doing that in multiple places, around the world. So for the benefit of the fishermen and the fisheries and the communities who rely on them, but also to the benefit of the markets, to help the markets, be able to supply the customer with a wide range of seafood, not just a big five all the time, and also unlock that door to being able to source more locally. I do believe that community catch in the UK will allow a lot more markets to start selling British seafood than they can right now, because even at M&S, when we were looking at bringing on some more British species, it was going to take a hell of a lot of work and a hell of a lot of due diligence to try and justify that as being okay. And it shouldn't be that hard, really. And I think what the concern is if markets say, actually, that's too much work, I'm not going to make the effort, I'm going to walk away from that. That is not good for anyone, because if people aren't engaged in the fishery, how can they possibly expect it to get better or improve or thrive, if there are challenges there. So, I'm really excited. I mean, I have to be careful to not be so biased to the UK, but, it is my background and it's where I'm based. But globally, replicating that and then seeing fishers getting rewarded for what they do day in, day out is amazing. That's the ultimate of what you would want to happen. And then also on the other side of it, we will have, hundreds of fisheries around the world, and we'll have, fantastic information and access to what's really going on in those fisheries. So for instance, if we've got a fishery somewhere and they're struggling, they're gillnet fishing or something, and they're struggling with bycatch of whatever it is, and they happen to be based in the Southern Hemisphere, and we've been working with the Northern Hemisphere fishery, and they've been having the same problem with bycatch, and they've solved it in this way, then, part of being part of community catch is learning from each other. So we want to take best practice from maybe the guys in the Southern Hemisphere have solved the problem. We want to take that best practice and share that with the guys who are struggling in another area, and help each other out, basically, because it's quite a lonely job to be a fisherman. You're basically at sea alone. Who are you talking to? You don't have time on shore to investigate the latest version of XYZ. So you need help to find solutions to some of these challenges. And I've always worked closely with people like Tom Rossiter, Catch Cam, and he's an incredible individual. I'm very lucky to know him. We work together at McFisheries. That's how we know each other. But what he's doing around the world and getting eyes on for the, giving the fishermen eyes of what their gear's doing for the first time in 40 years is incredible. And so, we need to help fishermen who are going to sea. They wake up every day and they want to go to sea and they want to catch fish. They don't want to be fiddling around trying to, solve all world problems. So if we can help support them to improve and solve problems that are causing them problems, then that's what community catch will do. And we'll do that all over the world. And I think it's very powerful what we're doing.
Would you say it's a fair comparison if I was to say I can envisage it almost with similarities to fair trade?
I suppose it has elements of that. So we work with some fisheries we talk to some fisheries that are already fair trade. So fair trade is a great idea, and we're all used to it with our bananas, aren't we? But there's many other things that there are quite a few fisheries which are in fair trade as well, and that's fantastic. There's some skipjack tuna fisheries that are in fair trade, and the principle of a premium price and then a kickback to the fishers is a great idea, but it comes at a cost. And it's really expensive for these fisheries to enter into that fair trade initiative, but it's absolutely necessary in many locations where there isn't fairness in what the fisherman or what the farmer receives. So community catch, I guess, we don't offer the same thing in that we don't offer a premium. So it's usually in the top 5 questions we're asked when we speak to a fishery: will I get paid more money by being a community catch fishery? And I have to say, well, I absolutely have no control over that whatsoever. But what you will get is a market talking to you who hasn't maybe talked to you before, or a market that you already trade with actually staying with you. So that's what you should expect. So I think the fair trade is good, but and does a great job. But I think community catch will do an equally good job at making sure that people are treated fairly, that there are no challenges in social elements of fishery and human rights, etc. Because I haven't pointed out, and maybe I should have said it earlier, but community catch is 100% free for fishermen. It doesn't cost anything at all for a fisherman to go through community catch. So unless it's a point, so nobody's going to do something if it's going to cost them a lot of money. And one of the 3 big hurdles of one of the biggest hurdles of why people aren't doing more in fishery improvement is because it costs a lot of money. So what's the opposite of costing a lot of money? Making it free. So it's completely free for fishermen to access this. So the community catch doesn't make any money if a fishery signs up to and goes through the community catch process. So the fishery would go through and complete all of the work and provide all the evidence against the self-assessment. And they might just stop at that point. They might just say, okay, I know where I am now. I know what I need to focus on. But if they want to get recognition and they want to be able to talk about it and put logos on pack potentially, they would get somebody to come and verify that. So a certification body would verify that. So they would hire them. And the person that hires them is set up with a fishery client. So the fishery client who wants to put the fishery through this a fishery client can be different people. It could be a man in his boat who just wants to do it for himself. It could be a primary processor who does it, like Orkney Crab, for instance. It could be a fishing association, so Orkney Fisheries Association. It could be a PO. It could be a retailer. And we've got a combination of all those different people leading this. And whoever's leading the fishery through that will pay for the certification body to basically mark the self-assessment. And the cost of that is approximately £10,000. It's a very, very small cost compared to alternatives out there. So that is paid for by the fishery client, and usually they're sort of market driven. And once that's all been assessed, the fishery is then either certified, so it's met every single one of the requirements, or it has to go into a fishery improvement plan to improve one of the metrics. If you're certified, you don't have to have another audit for another 5 years. You have a surveillance after 2.5 years, and then you've got it for 5 years. But if you're in a fishery improvement plan, you need to be verified every year and just check that you're making progress. So there's zero cost to any fisherman being part of this. So I guess I was meeting some fishermen last week on the East Coast, Southeast Coast, and they were saying, why wouldn't we do this then? And that kind of is the logic. Like, why wouldn't you just do this then? Why wouldn't you just go through this? So that's fantastic. So how Community Catch make any money? We're a charity, so we're not trying to make money, but we have to cover the costs, staff costs and digital platform, etc. So we then, our income really is coming from funding, but also through membership. So the chain of custody that you spoke about before. So the processing factories that will buy the product and trade the product and show off that is from a community catch fishery would need to pay an annual membership fee to us. And the fees are really low. So again, we absolutely know that people won't do this if it's going to cost a lot of money. So the starting membership fee is £200 per year as a membership for a business that's selling £1 million worth of seafood. So £200 a year is doable for most people. It does climb, when you're up towards the retailers, it's more expensive than that. But so we would take the income in through the membership, to allow us to continue to run. So we, in terms of making it accessible for fishermen, affordable, it's free, and it's accessible for digital platform. You don't need to pay for an auditor to come and spend 3 weeks with you digging around for information. You provide all of that yourself. So we're really proud of that, and that is again another point of difference compared to existing schemes.
That could become a real great marketing brand.
Yeah, and then, maybe check myself on that. Maybe I should have said that as the first sentence that came out of my mouth. Because when people know something's free, then the attitude does change to, well, why wouldn't we give this a go? Why wouldn't we try and do this for ourselves? Certainly 2 weeks ago, seeing new fishermen in brand new areas I hadn't been to before, saying, "Wow, we should just crack on with this." So I think that we're going to be busy. We've already got 6 fisheries live in the scheme right now, going through the self-assessment process. We expect them to come out next February-ish time with a result, so they'll either be certified or in a fishery improvement plan at that point. And we've got a really busy pipeline of fisheries who we expect to start engaging in January, really. And we're really, engaged at the same time as engaging the fishery, we have to engage the supply chain through to the end customer. So we make sure that they're aware that their fishery is doing this and the benefits for everybody really by doing that. So it's really exciting.
Very much so. Can small-scale and large-scale producers genuinely benefit from stronger local supply chains, or do interests inevitably clash?
No, I think absolutely can exist in the same orbit and similar markets. It's interesting because sometimes people think that small scale isn't viable for markets because they can't give consistent volume. They can't guarantee I'm going to deliver you 1 ton per week, for instance. But there's so many different markets compared to, it's not just retail or there's food service, there's delivery directly to home, direct to consumer. So there's, and then if you look at the larger scale guys, they don't want to be fiddling around with delivery to home or restaurants and hotels and ordering off and on. So there's a huge spectrum of the market and where you can sell seafood. I think in many ways COVID was fantastic for entrepreneurship within seafood, and you can get anything arriving in a box to your house. I'm part of that. That's how I shop as well. I get oysters delivered from Cape Wrath every month to the house, supporting that farm. I'm actually waiting for some of the warm water prawns to arrive today from the farm in Scotland that's just launched its product, because I'm quite nosy and want to see what that's happening with it. I order fish on a couple of other apps as well for home delivery of fresh fish, and it's basically done on the boat landed this tonight, do you want to buy some? So I think there's lots of different ways to get access to consumers, to brand yourself, to market yourself, and I would, I guess, encourage boats and fisheries to do that. Highlight what's different about you. Highlight that you are in this location. I'm a Peterhead crabber and there's me and my 2 brothers type thing, or what's unique about you? Because I think there's a section of society who care about that and want to know that story and want to buy from you and want to help you. And I think if you can say I'm a community catch fishery, look at my credentials, you can feel good about buying product from me. Here's my product. It's really exciting. So I think there's always got to be space for the big guys and the little guys, and it shouldn't be one at the cost of another. And also, I don't really support the gear type people fighting against each other either. I absolutely wouldn't say creelers are this or trawlers are that. I think they can all exist in harmony together. And I think you've got to look at everything on a case by case study. But so we're very agnostic in terms of preference. We will help anyone who wants help, so long as they're small, so long as they're not these giant commercial guys who are fishing in the high seas and that sort of stuff. That's not there to help. We're here to help everybody.
When you're talking about that, it's reminded me when I had, and of course my restaurant, my wife and I, is a small family business, and I got involved with MSC just because, just thinking, well, I was bought into it. But it was certainly, when you're talking about free and very cheap, that's certainly not the way with MSC. And it was costing me an eye-watering amount, and the boat would have chain of custody. They paid a lot. And I remember MSC used to talk about in the scheme. That was a term they used. Linda, I classed in the scheme, I pictured I'm in a darkened room. The lights are off. It's black. I don't know where the door is. I don't know who's in.
That's not a great image, is it? No, that's not good. And we need to give fisheries and fishermen choice, and Community Catch now give choice to fisheries to do it a different way. There's not just one model to do this. We've got a really different model. We're not trying to make profit. We don't even really mind whether you do or don't use our logo on pack. We're not selling logos. We don't charge people membership on a logo licensing fee. We just charge you a membership to support the organisation. And there's a different way, and it's incredible what MSC have done up until this point, and they are absolutely necessary. And thank goodness we have them for many fisheries around the world. But they aren't catering for everybody, and there's a gap. And we've seen that gap, and we've developed Community Catch to help support that gap, really, and not just ourselves. I think what's really exciting, is over the next few years, fisheries are going to have even more choice as well, because you're probably aware, but the RFM scheme that exists, elsewhere, that's now resurrected as CSI. That's an alternative now for those bigger industrial fisheries as well. So, we're not far away from having a system where you might have an MSC fishery, or you might have a CSI fishery, or you might have a Community Catch fishery, and buyers will be able to have choice. And choice is always good, because choice always makes everybody better. Everybody gets better when they know they've got some competition, and it's good for fisheries. And what's really exciting, and the big win, is when we see Community Catch product that would not have been sold in UK markets being sold in UK markets. That's, I think, when we know that we've been successful with this. When you've got UK retailers starting to buy their product in the UK instead of going abroad for it, and just the market that could create. But at the moment, their hands are tied. Their policy state that it all needs to be MSC, or they can't source it. And I think that we've got a real job to do in giving confidence to the markets. Community Catch have giving confidence to the markets that we're credible, and we offer a great due diligence for them, and they can then start purchasing more British seafood with confidence. So watch this space, really. And if we start seeing lots of seafood and the demand exceeds the supply, then it's a nice problem to have, isn't it?
I felt at the time, RFC, I'm pleased that you mentioned that, and it's still there and thereabouts, maybe albeit in a different name. I thought that was by far, at the time, the best, better to me than MSC, because it was an industry itself that was involved in it, and all sides were in it.
Yeah, I think hopefully a lot of people, we've all, been in retail and manufacturing, we've all supported fishery improvement plans for many years, and the ones that are successful are the ones that are driven by the catching sector, because unless the fishermen and the boats want to do something and see the need to improve or to gain certification, then everything else is top down, and nobody really likes being told what to do in life. So I think that, like the RFM scheme, where it's done by a country and the country really wanted this and got behind it, is fantastic. And Community Catch, again, it's about it's fishery led, so it's empowering those fisheries, and it's up to them. And I think anything that is fishery led is going to be more successful because people want to do it. I think we have. I think people are now coming away from that top-down fishery improvement plan where I'm telling you what to do because the market demands it. I don't think people like that, want that, need that. So it's exciting. And I think the CSI will be really interesting to watch. I think it'll be very interesting to watch those big MSC fisheries around the world and what direction they choose to go in. Now there's an alternative for them. Iceland was always very strong in that area, Norway, Alaska. South Africa, they've all got big MSC fisheries. So that's exciting. So we'll see what's happening there for the big guys. But we don't need to be dabbling in the area as community catch. There's plenty of fisheries that aren't anywhere near any scheme that we need to help. So most of the time we're talking to people who aren't in the FIP or haven't been involved with MSC before.
I take it when you mentioned, I'm assuming anyway, that when you mentioned RFS, that's the Responsible Fishing Scheme.
Sorry, no, RFM, so Responsible Fishery Management. So, RFS, I think so RFS, which is now RFVS, is the vessel specific scheme that lots of boats in the UK fleet signed up to a few years ago. And it was really good initially, RFS, and it was about the health and safety of the crew, and it was a great scheme. And then it got changed over to RFVS, and it's lost its way quite a bit. And I actually, I know that there's not many boats left now in the fleet that have the RFVS. It's an individual cost to the vessel. They have to pay for it themselves. And really a lot of the vessels have moved away from there. So again, that's something that Community Catch have considered. And, if you go through the Community Catch scheme, it really covers off anything that RFVS would have offered you. I also think as well, since the MCA have started to get more active and, boarding vessels and everything, they cover off quite a decent amount of that RFVS standard now. They're looking at that health and safety quite, thoroughly. So I think the days maybe of the RFVS are in the past. I know there's people still trying to keep it alive, but again, it's a cost to a fisherman, and they're being told what to do, and what value do they get from that? And maybe there's another way for them. So, but I know many vessels did it back in the day, and lots of the Scottish Haddock fleet were signed up, 20 odd boats I think at one time. So, and I know there's still quite a few vessels that have it, but it is at the cost of the individual vessel. So when times are hard, people start to question, well, why am I paying that money, and why am I paying this money, and how do I get better value for money? So again, choice is good, isn't it? Because then they can say, well, I could get that same thing for free. So it's good. I mean, fishermen, it's good that people are listening to fishermen and saying, how can we help and support you? And they're going to be able to sit back and make choices rather than just have to do what they've been told a little bit. So always positive when it's like that.
Definitely. Do you ever get to the stage when you feel you're engineering demand for local seafood, or is the appetite really there?
I think it is. I spend a lot of time on the west coast of Scotland, families there, and the west coast of Scotland is unbelievable. Like you're falling over seafood shacks, aren't you? And the amount of seafood you get served up on menus there is incredible. You're eating everything that's landed daily off the boats that you can see out the window, and that's really normal on the west coast of Scotland. I think I don't see that so much on the east coast of Scotland. Really, like you don't have where's a fishmonger in Peterhead? And I'm told there's no need for a fishmonger in Peterhead because everybody knows a skipper. So why go to a shop to do it when you can just get the fish off a skipper? And that's fine, but not everybody knows a skipper. So I think that having those fishmongers, I know a few fishmongers as well, and we might have said that the supermarket destroyed the fishmonger and they all closed down, but there are some spectacular fishmongers. I live down in Surrey, some absolutely spectacular fishmongers who strongly support British sourcing, either off I'm down here, so they're sourcing specifically off the south coast, but that boat, they'll take everything that they catch, and absolutely spectacular. And it's a win-win situation. They've got the freshest, best fish, variety of species. The fisherman's got a regular customer, created a whole market. And I do think if you do something well, it will be successful. It might be more expensive, but it's value for money, I think. So it might be a little bit more expensive to buy that thing. But if it's the tastiest thing you've ever tasted and you didn't waste a gram of it, then that's great value for money. And so, fishmongers, get behind your fishmonger, who's, ask them where it's coming from. Definitely start doing that in a fish and chip shop as well. And if anybody's selling you haddock that's not from Scotland, don't buy haddock, would be my advice. The customer's got to start asking the question, where did that fish come from? And why don't you know where that fish came from? And start demanding that. Fish and chip shops, I think, are a great example of people think that fish literally came from the shores around the UK. And on most occasions, that is not the case. We're spoilt in Scotland in that it often is the case, but the majority of fish and chip shops are not using British landed fish. So I think we need to ask that question, and we need to ask them to start sourcing fish from around our shores and trying different things.
You know, when you're saying that, Linda, one of the things I found was our biggest marketing point was when we had the seafood restaurant, and outside we had we called it the seafood bar, Scrubs Seafood Bar, and that was like fish and chips and stuff like that, with obviously so close to the ferry terminal, people would just have some quick bites. 20 years, a month short of 20 years, we ran that. And from the first menu to the last, the footer on the menu told our customers every time the name of the boat that landed it and where he was fishing.
I think
and people loved that.
Yeah, they do. And they're also very sympathetic to it as well. If it's just blown an absolute gale and the boat's been tied up for 4 days and you don't happen to be able to serve them some Scottish haddock or some crab because the little boats couldn't get out or something, people are sympathetic to that because they can see it and they know it, and so they'll go, okay, well, I'll try this instead then. What else can I do to support these fishermen? So I don't think you need to have exactly the same fish on your menu all of the time. It's a seasonal thing. We should be eating it as much in season as possible, and we should be eating it when it's available and flexible to try something else. And I think fish and chip shops could do a lot more in supporting the UK fishing industry, a lot more than they do.
That's a real bone of contention with me. I feel when you look at the amount of fish and chip shops in the country wide who buy foreign frozen at sea, and they'll have beautiful fish on their doorstep. I just really find that so disappointing.
Yeah, and I think that the general public would also be horrified to know that too. So, I think there's a lot more that can be done from that sector to support British seafood. And to be quite honest, when a white fish is covered in batter or breadcrumbs, it could really be haddock, cod, hake, whiting. It could be a wide range of species because you're tasting the batter and the breadcrumbs. So it's a great way to introduce people to new species they've not tried before. So the Great British Fish and Chip Shop should absolutely be serving Great British fish. And it's, it's a staple. People queuing up for hours on a Friday night for the fish and chips, and they just naively assume it's come out of the water, and that's not the case on many occasions. So if we can inspire people to start asking where that fish came from, I think that's a good start. And then if the answer's not it came from the UK, then I think you need to start asking the fish and chip shop why not, and what are they going to do?
Well, I always, my menu on the fish and chip shop, on the takeaway and the seafood bar, we sold fish and chips. It was never haddock and chips or cod and chips. It was fish and chips. And as far as I was concerned, Linda, it was my responsibility to make the decision what is best in that season on that day. What is best? And that was my responsibility to make sure I had the best. I was just saying it recently to Mike Warner. I standing at the kiosk at the fryer, and this guy, local guy, stood at the hatch. He says to me, "Have you haddock?" And I said, "No, but we have a really good." And before I said anything more, he had swiveled in his feet and he was off. I was going to finish and say, "We have really good, delicious hake that we just got this morning." But there wasn't haddock, so he left before I...
Yeah. I think a lot of people wouldn't really know what they're eating, to be honest, in a fish and chip shop, would they? Necessarily, but
that's what I felt. I could have said, we have lovely haddock.
Exactly. The fish and chip shop's closest to my mum's, actually in Girvan, so West Coast, regularly serves whiting and whiting or haddock, and it's always in cutlets. It's always block. So it's because they're small fish, and it's either one or the other, and they alternate. They'll tell you what it is if you ask them, but they're selling fish and chips, and it's great, and it really makes very little difference at that time, and it's whatever that's been landed that day. So
Yeah. What's the most encouraging behaviour shift you're seeing among the fishers you work with?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think they're starting to get quite organised. I think smaller scale communities starting to get quite organised. You've got people like Mike Warner flying the flag down in Anglesey, which is really powerful. You've got the west coast of Scotland, really taking responsibility and differentiating themselves, in what they're doing on the west coast. And you've got, I'm close to an organisation called Fishing into the Future, which is a great concept. I'm really lucky enough to have been to 2 of them already. I'm going to one in southeast Scotland actually in end of January. And what a great, you feel so privileged to be part of that. But, that's all about the fishermen and getting the fishermen in a safe space, in a room, so they can challenge science, challenge policy, ask all these questions and, really be listened to, and people hear their challenges really. And I think, supporting organisations like Fishing into the Future and actually the fishermen to have that voice and get access to all these different bodies who can support them, because I think it is confusing. I still haven't fully mapped it out, but I don't know if it's deliberately confusing or accidentally confusing, but if you even try and map out all the organisations that are supposed to be there to help, it is quite difficult to know what everybody's trying to do. So there's a big job to do there to coordinate it all, and not, and we can all sit in offices and make up these great plans, but unless we're speaking to a fisherman and the fisherman thinks this is a good idea, we're all wasting our time. So, I think getting close to the fishermen, listening to what their problems are and what they worry about and what they need is the best thing. And so, go to them. They don't have time to be trailing around the country coming to you, and I think the FREP do that really well in that, that's paid for the fishermen to come and spend a few days there. That's all the costs are covered for them to do that, and that's great because they recognise the sacrifice that's being made there to to get there. So but power to the people, I suppose. It's
absolutely. It's a fantastic organisation. The one in the Clyde last year, I just thought, just everybody around the table talking. It just couldn't.
Powerful, isn't it?
Absolutely tremendous.
Yeah, it was tremendous, wasn't it? That one, really good. And the one I'd been to before in York as well, and then the South East Scotland. And then there's going to be one in East Anglia as well, I believe. So I want to try and get to as many as possible and help them, and just the connections that you make, and just people need to feel like they're listened to, and that somebody else can help shoulder that responsibility or help solve problems for them. So,
do you see any big trust gaps still sitting?
Yeah, probably. I think there's quite a lot of heavy lifting goes on by the industry in the absence of policy in UK fishing a lot. I think FMPs is an example of that. They're taking a long time. English ones, Scottish ones. So when do they come into play? We need them. We need if they're co-developed, fantastic. But we need guidelines. We need rules. So that people can have clarity and move forward. That's really important. I think that again we need clarity and deadlines not to move on things like REM. If we're going to have electronic monitoring on board vessels to monitor catch composition, then if we're going to set dates, we need to stick to the date on that. We need to follow through and do the things we say we're going to do. I think in a world where it's uncertain, it's not helpful. And I think fundamentally, human beings will always keep doing what they're doing unless there's a deadline in place. It's just human nature, isn't it? So I think if the FMPs need to stick to the dates they're going to come into, and I think we need clarity on electronic monitoring. I think that there's probably some work to do on convincing the fishermen why electronic monitoring is necessary. and why it's beneficial actually to everybody, and how it's not Big Brother. But I think there's a big piece to go on there, where there's probably a lack of trust from all sides, really. But I think it's necessary, and if it's not REM, then what is it? But how do we know how many fish we're taking out of the water, so that we can accurately know what the stocks are, so we can accurately then set the tax for the next year? Because every year you go through the same conversations of how that was unfair ICES advice, or that was this, or that was that. And that's not the reality of what fishermen are seeing on the water. And we've got to find a way, I think, to harness what fishermen are seeing in the water with the science. And that comes from data collection, and, collecting that data in a passive way, so that we know what's actually coming out of the water to then inform the science. I think that, I think the fishermen know what's going on, but it's not translating into what everybody else thinks is going on. And so there's a bit of a gap there.
I think you're right, but I don't think ICES help themselves very much coming out with statements like zero cod for 26.
Yeah, it seems like this year's just felt like that in general, hasn't it? It seems like this big headline statement, on many stocks this year. It's a tough year. It's like a generation, once in a generation type stuff, isn't it, that's happening? And then all the negotiations start, and then it settles somewhere. But it seems to me there's a gulf between ICES advice, what the fishermen are seeing, and there's a need there, I think. I don't know who does it, but there's a need there for it all to get a lot more close together, so that everybody feels like they're being heard, and then decisions can be made, rather than the declaration of this really hard line and then a negotiation from that. Because ultimately, if advice is based on good science and good data, and scientific advice is given, and that's not adopted, then that undermines the whole thing anyway, doesn't it? So so interesting times with cod, mackerel as well, blue whiting, and it's going to be a very different year next year. But I think it needs to be better and much more joined up than it has been, and hopefully people don't want to go through this again, and so hopefully people will come together more to try and say, well, how do we prevent that in the future? But I don't know which body will pull that together. I'm not sure where that sits. But again, that'll be pulling people into the same space and listening to each other and working through it, and wanting to work through it, really.
Yeah. If you could change a policy or funding block now, what would make the biggest difference, do you feel?
I don't know. I thought about this question earlier, actually, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm all about transparency, because I don't really mind what the problem is, or the challenge is, or the gap is, but you can't help to make anything better if you don't know what the problem is. And I really would welcome much better transparency about, I guess about many things, using having cameras on seabed. Let's find out once and for all, what impact are we really making on the seabed in this substrate, that substrate, whatever it is, eyes on it. Let's judge it based on facts, so let's get transparency down there. Again, let's get transparency about how much bycatch is really being, caught up, how much, are we all following the landing obligation to the T, So I would say whatever brings better transparency to the industry and what's coming out the water, where is it coming from, will help everybody, because we'll have, better data, and we'll be able to judge our stocks based on facts. So however we get to that place of trust, which I think is trust, so that fishermen feel like they can declare what's actually happening without being battered over the head. We have to have that sort of amnesty, and we have to have that sort of declaration of this is what it was like, this is what I caught today, this is what I caught last week. And then, okay, that's interesting. What are we going to do about that? I suppose that leads on to something. I think probably for me, having worked for the last few years with, a few fishers who've been trying to work with alternative fishing gears to avoid bycatch, to mitigate bycatch, to allow better escapement and different things, it does strike me as being ridiculous that they're not able to adopt new gear technologies which significantly reduce bycatch after they've done extensive sea trials. It seems, we're sat with the answers to many of, the West Coast and Northern Irish fishermen with the, Nephroc fleet and bycatch mitigation of whiting. They've done amazing trials there, really robust trials to mitigate that whiting and, no top nets and two cod ends and all sorts of stuff. And the fact that fishermen can't just adopt this gear now and go out fishing with it is ridiculous. So we're standing in our own way to improve things. So we have to find a way actually in policy to unlock that. And after good trials, robust trials, we can let people get on and do it. And in line with continuing to gather data. But at the moment, it feels like we've got all these solutions, but they're all in the cupboard and you're not allowed to use them. And that's
a great analogy. And
that's sad, isn't it? Because people get fed up, don't they? Yeah. And they just think, well, I'm fighting a losing battle here. I'm trying to help everybody. I'm trying to help this, but you won't let me do the right thing. And I think that's too strict. But the mesh panel rules, where the mesh panel has to be, what size the mesh panel is. I think it's out of date, and I think it needs to be much more flexible than it is now for the fishermen. I think fishermen want to have a clean catch, but the hands are tied behind the back. So yeah, I suppose. Yeah, that would be what I would change in policy, that there's a much slicker mechanism for letting people adopt more selective gears that are more appropriate to their fishery.
When you're saying that, it's reminding me something I often feel, Linda, and people try to control or hold on to seize the name conservationist. Many fishermen I speak to, I class them as conservationists as well.
Absolutely. I mean, they won't have a job or a livelihood, will they, if they're working in the short-term mentality at all? So we're not harnessing all the information that they've got at their fingertips, and they're sat there. We don't listen to them, or we do listen to them and then we don't do anything about it, and then people will clam up and they'll just not share anymore. And I think people have lost trust as well. And so there's a big change that's needed there. But, change always starts slowly. You have to start with individuals who are willing to take a bit of a risk. But, at the other side, you have to make sure that they're not putting themselves at risk by being open and transparent and everything. So, we need to stop pretending that there are challenges. We need to acknowledge there are challenges and acknowledge that unless we start facing into those challenges, we won't move forward. But we need to be able to do that as a collaborative, group. I really hope that can happen in the near term. Some of these challenges are years old, and we've still not, addressed them. And selective gear is probably the first place I'd start, really. Because if you start letting people use gear to get a cleaner catch and avoid things, then that's a really good thing for everybody. And the fishermen will feel like they've been trusted then to take the right decisions and therefore willing to cooperate and collaborate in future as well. So yeah, I'd like to see that.
What does success look like for you in the community catch in 5 years?
Well, yeah, I thought about this one. So, I really would like to see, much more UK inshore fisheries, species, appearing in UK markets. So for a start, I'd like to see a really strong adoption of community catch across the British Isles. I think it'll come from fishermen trust fishermen. So I think it'll come from the sector itself saying, wow, we've done this thing in Orkney, you should do it too, type thing. So I'd really like to see, that that the UK can show off and say, look at all our responsible fisheries. We're not just telling you about the ecosystem environment, we're telling you about the human rights and animal welfare in the UK as well. So really like to see that. But, more than that, I'd like to see the communities and fishermen feeling like, optimism, I suppose, about, wow, since we joined Community Catch, look at us now. These markets are buying from us. We can't keep up, really. These new people are speaking to us. We're now selling our product to this person who didn't even know about us before. And, that's a story of success, really. So that's what I'm hoping to deliver with the team over that period of time, as well as, doing exactly the same in the other areas of the world. And, to be able to do that, we need to have regional ambassadors. We need to have hubs set up in different areas of the world, who know that landscape. So, I'm very biased to UK, but, we need to have people in East Africa who really understand what's important to people in East Africa. We need to have people in Indonesia who really understand what's important there. Central America, South America, exactly the same. So setting up those regional hubs where you've got people who really, they've got good connections that can facilitate relationships between the West Coast and the East Coast and everything, and really help support and create those communities for the fishermen to thrive. So, and wouldn't it be great if we started seeing people coming into small scale sector and saying, wow, actually, I'm going to get a boat now. I'm going to move into this because look at this market that's created. And, I want to join that. I want to get involved. And that's a lucrative thing for me to be involved in. So, that would be really successful. I think in 5 years' time, we set out our plan a year ago, and we're hoping to have around 40 fisheries probably by 2028, 40 fisheries globally in the initiative. I'd like a lot of those to be the UK. We've already got 2 in the UK. Hopefully by early next year we'll have 3 more, and that we're already in conversations with. But 40 fisheries around the world, and that's 40 brand new fisheries that have previously would not have been considered by any big markets as having a responsible seafood offer. So that's exciting, isn't it? To have
Totally.
a totally different species, all sorts of really wonderful seafood for people to enjoy.
Oh, that's good. Back to the word you used earlier, Linda. Exciting.
Yeah, I think it's a word I use quite a lot, actually. And it genuinely
understand why.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great privilege to be part of something that, it feels like after all the years doing what I've done, it sort of brought me to this place, really. And, to really make a difference here is, it's a great privilege. And hopefully, I can. And, it's pretty quick as well. Once people decide they want to do it, within 6 months, they'll pop out the other end of it. And, it could be transformational, couldn't it, for a community? So really want to be part of that. And, I want to go and see some of these fisheries as well. So back to Orkney, as I said, in the new year, but, go and see some of these amazing fisheries around the world and make sure that they know we're here to support them.
How do you go to Orkney? Fly or by ferry?
I've never taken the ferry, actually. I've always flown. So, I just always fly. I used to travel from Aberdeen all the time, so that was easy, but London's via Aberdeen or Glasgow or somewhere. But Loganair.
Well, if you were interested to try it, I'll send you my phone number, stuff like that. If you were to drive and take the ferry from Scrabster, I could meet you, we could have a bite of something together, and I could introduce you to a lot of fishermen around Scrabster, fish out of Scrabster.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love to do that. I will take you up on that offer. I usually go up to, I know Durness is on more the west side, but really around autumn time would have gone up to Durness, planning to do that again next year. Last time I was up near Scrabster, I was in Thurso actually with my husband many, many years ago, so I haven't been up there for a while, but I'll take you up on that offer, Jim. I will come and see you. I'll make a plan to.
I mean, there's a lot of 1-2 men boats, or obviously fishing lobster, crab, velvet crabs, langoustines, and then pollock and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different methods and guys trying different things. I think I think
absolutely would love.
Sorry, I'm cutting in on you. I feel that's exciting, and I know it's a lot of it is guys that maybe had other boats in the past and they've reinvested and they're still heavily involved, which I think is fantastic.
You see that quite a lot, don't you? They come off the bigger boats but still got fishing in their blood, and so they still want to get out there and maybe got a small creeler and everything. So I mean, yeah, you see them out of Peterhead as well, the tiny little boats next to the giant pelagic. So you think, oh my goodness, don't squash each other. They're just mini. But yeah, I mean, these guys need a break, don't they? They need recognition. They need the opportunity to sell to whoever they want to sell to and show off about what they've got and the efforts are going to. So I'd love to do that. So I will take you up on that, Jim, and you'll be seeing me in the next 12 months. Definitely.
Excellent. Well, that's an open invitation, so there's no time restriction. Where's the real long-term growth for the coastal communities and seafood itself, or wider ecosystem around it?
I think seafood's got a long way to run, and I guess that's what we're prioritizing. I know seaweed's a big thing now in that whole aquatic space. Seaweed farming is coming up, and I think that'll be an area as well in Scotland in future years. But there's a lot of competition now for that aquatic space, isn't there, that hasn't been there before. I think the whole wind farm conversation is difficult. Lots of fishermen being displaced because of wind farms down in England in particular, and that has an impact. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I tend to try and just focus on the seafood side, but yeah, I think what's happening more on that seafood side is that sort of more eco-tourism type thing, like getting out there on a boat, getting out on a boat when you're in Scotland or anywhere, trips, going and understanding the wider wildlife, piece, like the eagles, the seals, the otters, everything else that's in the water as well, the dolphins, the whales, my goodness, we've got the orca whales up in Shetland. There's a huge range of amazing nature to see if you get out on the water, and it can all operate together in harmony, with the right level of respect. So I think it's a phenomenal sector to be involved in, that whole getting out on the water, and it's a vast space, isn't it? But we need to respect it, and we need to not exploit it, and we need to we're great as humans at knocking things out of balance, aren't we? So we need to take care of it for the future to come, so and learn more about it. And we don't know so much yet, do we, about the sea and what's underneath the sea? So it's just constantly discovering. But yeah, exciting. But I think education and getting people out there and to connect it, getting people on boats to go and see it for themselves. And I think people's interpretation of what fishing is different to what fishing actually is as well. And so many people don't get to ever see what fishing is unless you're seeing it on television, and that's not always when it's portrayed at its best either. So yeah.
The only thing I would maybe add to when you said we don't know what's under the sea, I was just thinking, well, maybe our friend Tom Rossiter's taking care of that, so we will maybe see more.
I know. I personally think, I keep saying this to Tom, I personally think they should be issued to every single skipper in the land, actually. And I think just everybody should. And wouldn't that be wonderful if we were being that transparent as an industry that we just naturally had cameras in our nets? Because why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we want to see what's happening in our nets? Why wouldn't we want to see, why did that come in here, and why did it go out there, and why didn't I catch that, and why did I catch this? And I'd love to see the day where it's perfectly normal to have cameras streaming into your wheelhouse all the time, showing you what's in the nets. And I think we're getting close to that. I think, and I really support that, because to have that visibility and be able to take decisions based on seeing it for yourself will make a huge difference to the sector. And even the boats that we did some trials when I was at M&S on boats, and they only went out on like 1 or 2 trips, and by the time they got back they'd already changed their gear setup completely based on the information they got from the camera. So it's completely astonishing that anybody catches anything, to be honest. Really, just now based on not having eyes on it, but it's all through years of experience, isn't it? But it can be so much better when you actually can see what you're doing. So yeah, I wish Tom and his business all the success, and he's a busy man all over the world and doing great things.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Linda, where can our listeners follow you online?
Okay, well, I'm probably the noisy one then on LinkedIn. So I use LinkedIn quite a lot. Well, a lot generally. So Linda Wood on LinkedIn. Yeah, so you find me there. Community Catch website. You'd be able to talk to us on there. Anybody can contact me through LinkedIn at any time. I always love a chat, and always interested to find out about new things as well. But yeah, you'll find me on there, or Community Catch website, which is communitycatch.org.
Fantastic. Well, I think that gets us to this day, and I think we'll fold up and just genuinely thank you so much. And I find your excitement, your terms that you use, exciting and things like that. I can tell you, Linda, that comes across. So well done, and thank you so much for chat today.
Oh, good. I'm glad it comes across, because it's how I feel, and yeah, it's very passionate about what we're trying to do here. But thank you very much, Jim, for the opportunity. It's a real honour. I listen to your podcast and see the big names there and think, wow, these are titans of industry. So I'm very honoured to be.
I feel the same about that. I'm very almost humbled with some of them.
Yeah, it's great what you're doing, and wish you all the best in support, and more people to sign up and listen.
Thank you.